This month, the world lost an intellectual titan in former UK Chancellor and journalist Nigel Lawson. He was Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor of the Exchequer. He was the editor of The Spectator in the UK. He boasted a political career spanning 5 decades and, only a decade or so ago, he founded the Global Warming Policy Foundation, which is one of the lone voices of reason in the climate debate. Well, joining us now to discuss the legacy of the great Nigel Lawson, who, by the way, his daughter was, yes, Nigella Lawson, is geologist Ian Plimer. Ian, always great to see you. You knew Nigel Lawson. You were invited many times to speak at the Global Warming Policy Foundation. The legacy of Nigel Lawson is huge, isn't it?
Well, yes, I met Lord Lawson in 2009, and that was in his third career. His first career, as you mentioned, was a financial journalist and was once editor of The Spectator. His second career was in politics, in the House of Commons and later in the House of Lords. And his third career for the last 20 years was dealing with the insanity of human-induced global warming. And he set up the Global Warming Policy Foundation. I sit on the academic board. I've given many talks that he'd organised at the House of Lords and public talks. He came to Australia in a debate mode, and I joined him in a debate on one side. On the other side was actually a person who often appears on your program, and that person was debating against Lawson, and we won the debate hands down. And that person changed his mind. And
there you go. Probably because of the debate. I know who you're going to refer to. And that person is Mark Latham.
Well, Mark Latham.
Mark Latham, I'm sure, was persuaded by Ian in a formidable debate. I was at that debate. It was a great evening. It was organised by The Spectator. And you're right, Mark Latham spoke passionately in favour of climate change, but you won the debate and you won his mind, you and Nigel Lawson. We fast forward to today. Would you have thought back then, Ian, that we would still be, we would have gone so far down the sort of insanity of net zero that you were warning against way back then could only lead to higher energy prices and higher electricity bills?
Well, both Lord Lawson and I were very much aware this was a long, long road, that it wasn't going to be an easy one to win. It was a bit like Lord Lawson's lowering of tax for the top 1% of people in the UK. And he suffered massive criticism that went on for years. And eventually it could be shown that if you lower tax for the highest income earners, your tax revenue actually increases. This is counterintuitive. And we were very much aware that this is a long-term battle with a huge amount of vested interest, with a lot of emotion and very little data. And those that do prevent data are those who couldn't get a job unless they were funded in the climate industry by our taxes. So we were aware it was going to be a long road. Lawson he thought that we would win this on the basis of logic. Logic and emotion don't go together. You can't win it on logic. You have to win it on economics. And I have always argued that when it really starts to financially hurt, then people will change their mind. And that's what's happening now in the UK and in Germany.
And Professor Plimer, I wanted to ask you about that. I'm really glad you mentioned that economic pain. When you listen to Chris Bowen, our Energy and Resources Minister, talk about the transition and and then you look at what the CSIRO and others have said, what the actual cost of this will be. How long do you think it's going to be before Australians are suffering the same sort of pain that they're suffering in England and Germany? And as a follow-up to that, do you think Australians will respond in the same way at the ballot box?
Well, I think until we have a Nigel Lawson come along in our political scene, it's going to be very, very hard to have a change, because one of the points that Lawson made was that once you have a consensus across the political parties, then in effect there has been no debate and there's been no careful thinking, and your policy is absolutely and totally wrong. Now, this is where we are at present in Australia. Our policy is wrong. And if Chris Bowen really wanted to understand what was going on, he should leave Parliament and work as a farmer. And he would then know that he's losing his farmlands to monstrosities that slice and dice birds. He's losing his farmland, best farmland, to solar panels. He's having his land taken from him, and this land is then being pensioned off and used for carbon credits. And what this is saying is that we are now producing less food in this country because we're going for an energy system that's totally and absolutely inefficient. So I'm sorry, but Chris Bowen just doesn't have the experience or the intellect to be able to change anything in this country. All he's going to do is to make matters worse. And we need an Alexander the Great to come through with a sword and just cut the Gordian knot, and to have some policies that actually benefit people in Australia. Because what Nigel Lawson was interested in was that he wanted to have economic growth, but he didn't want to have this at the pain of the average person, that he wanted to have much, much better outcomes, and he didn't want to have economic growth destroyed by unproven possibilities. And this is where Bowen is going wrong. He is hanging on to unproven possibilities.
Well, you mentioned Germany. They had a vote recently, well, Berlin has had anyway, about having tighter climate controls, having a bolder emission target. How did that go?
Like a lead balloon. Germany is an industrial country. Germany that comes from brown coal and black coal and nuclear. More recently, they've been taking gas from a very, very friendly source called Russia. And they thought that they could live with sunbeams in Germany. Come on, you've got to be joking. And when you've got half an inch of snow on your solar panels, they don't work. And they thought they could live off sunbeams and off wind. Well, they suffered wind droughts. They suffered solar panels that weren't working. They suffered Mr. Putin turning off the gas. And Germany has finally said, well, wait a minute. We've lost so much industry leaving Germany and going to places like Thailand rather than having the industry in Germany, that maybe we're down the wrong path. And even the Greens in Germany decided that this was the wrong path, and maybe nuclear was a very good way of making electricity in Germany.
Professor Ian Plimer, always great to chat to you. Thanks for joining us on this Easter morning. Out on the farm there, I'm sure you'll find some Easter eggs. I hope you don't bump into Warren Mundine. He's looking for his. Always great to chat to you, Ian. Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders this morning, and we'll chat again soon.